think that the authenticity part comes out in the external part when you can tell when someone is very scripted. They they stick to a very narrow, talk track, and that's not always a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, but it is an authenticity. People know when you're being authentic and when you're not. And it often hurts you more to say something that, even if it's the best thing you could have possibly said, if it's not authentic, it backfires.
Welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply, the podcast that explores the art and science of business communication. Sponsored by Prezent, the AI-powered platform transforming the way professionals share ideas and tell their stories. And now, here's your host, Rajat Mishra, CEO of Prezent, and passionate advocate for clear and impactful communications.
In today's interconnected business environment, aligning internal and external communications is crucial to maintain a cohesive brand narrative and foster trust among stakeholders. As communication expert Lee F. Jaffe once said, "The way we communicate with others and with ourselves ultimately determines the quality of our lives." Mastering the connection between internal and external communication is a skill that organizations can develop to enhance transparency and consistency. By ensuring that employees are informed and engaged, companies can project a unified message to the public, strengthening their reputation and credibility. Today, we delve into the strategies and challenges of integrating internal and external communications. Our guest today, Keyana Corliss, will share her expertise on creating cohesive communication frameworks, drawing from her extensive experience leading corporate communications at Pigment, Databricks, and at Tableau. Whether you're a communications professional or a business leader, this episode offers you valuable insight into harmonizing your organization's messaging both within and beyond your company's walls. Keyana, welcome to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. That was such a great intro. I feel like I don't need to add anything to it.
Keyana, you and I talked a little bit. You've had such an inspiring journey across in leadership roles across so many companies. Maybe you can share a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of an unorthodox journey to corporate communications. I studied finance, and I worked in finance originally, thinking that that was going to fulfill me. Shocker, did not. And I really wanted to be a journalist. I went and got my journalism degree and started to work in journalism, and I was a sports reporter. I had a comms person for one of the local sports teams in the DC area where I lived at the time tell me that I was the worst reporter he had ever seen, but that I would make a very good communications person. And at the time, I didn't really understand or know what he was talking about. And lo and behold, I sort of found myself in a world of at a tech PR agency. And I think one of the best things for me was that I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I took a very human element to figure it out. So, and what I mean by that is I think, a lot of times we're taught as PR people to like pitch reporters or send them these long ideas and things like that. And I always thought, I'm like, who reads these? Who's going to, write a story that I just tell them to write? They're not going to do that. And so I just took a very human approach to it. And I think that ended up, working out for me in terms of just the relationships I was able to build. And and then there was a little bit of luck in there. I got on this tiny account at the PR agency called Tableau. No one had ever heard of them. And they became, they kind of changed my life. And I ended up heading over there as an in-house comms person. We went public. We were public for 5 years, which was a lot of what I'll talk about today. I'll draw on from what that sort of taught me, and then we sold to Salesforce, which that was also a great lesson in bringing together internal and external comms. And from there, I was able to go to Databricks, which at the time was, believe it or not, there was a time where Databricks was a tiny little AI startup that no one had ever heard of, and that was an amazing journey. Ali Gotzi there is just one of the best CEOs in the business, and learning from him and just his approach to internal communications, which, you said at the beginning of this that this is in a good podcast for anyone who's a business leader or in comms. He is truly one of the best when it comes to internal communications. And I think that's largely why Databricks there's a lot of reasons Databricks has been very successful, but among them is just his ability to communicate with his employees. And, when you're growing at a couple billion, revenue at 80% year over year, you better get everybody on board, because, that's a feat. So, it's been a really great journey. And then Pigment has been such an amazing role for me in terms of just the people I get to work with. It's a lot of folks that we were at Tableau together. So in a sense, I feel like we have the band back together, but we've all learned a few things in the last 10 years. So, I think and I'm excited to chat about this more. I think I've been very fortunate and blessed in the career I've had, but I've learned a lot, and I've made, some really good decisions, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And I would argue my mistakes have probably taught me more than those good decisions. So I'm here to impart those on the rest of you all.
That's awesome.
Maybe save you all from my mistakes.
No, thank you. And, it's a lot of humility and awareness for you to kind of state that. So let's start, Keyana, with the basics. So we're going to talk about internal and external communications. What is internal communications in a large company? What is external communication? Maybe you can give us a little bit of a rundown, and then we'll talk about how we connect.
So there's two things I think is important to understand. I think the first thing is that there's two types of internal communications. And the first is what many of you might be thinking of, is like, the idea of, the emails you get from your company, that it's like, it's time to re-enroll in benefits, or we have a town hall, on Monday, or, these are our new, platforms we're using for whatever. Those are what I like to call kind of the people team or HR team internal communications. They're very important. They also need to be done very, very well. But they're less aligned to kind of the corporate communications that I'm referring to today. The internal communications that I'm more sort of concerned with on a day-to-day basis, and it's not that I'm not concerned with the others, just they're not really as much of my scope or wheelhouse for that matter, is the things that come out of our executives' mouths or inboxes. And we live in a very interesting world today, and I think it's been like this for quite some time, where there is very little separation at this point between work and personal life. I don't know about you, but for me, it's like all one blur. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, it's just one big blur. And I think who you work for and the type of person you work for, and not just, their values or their politics or things like that, but their sense of transparency, their passion and values towards the company, their work ethic, those all matter to people more than ever. And it's really important that the way that executives are presenting themselves towards their team members, their employees, is thoughtful. And what they say in town halls or, at Ask Me Anythings, the emails that they send about, whether it's a social issue or a political issue, or if it's about, a competitor, or if it's about, an industry. I mean, it doesn't have to be, limited to what's going on in the outside world. It could be what's going on in the company. Those all matter, and those all carry a lot more weight than I think they once did. People used to be able to just separate work and life. I think that that's near impossible at this point. And that's just the honest truth of it. And so those types of communications matter. So that's sort of what I talk about when I say, what is internal comms? It's a lot of people refer to it as executive communications, like internal executive communications. It's really like, are you aligning what you say externally? Are you aligning that internally? And additionally, are you putting forth the brand and the message? And are you creating the buy-in and the ethos and the culture of a company that you want to, through the words that you say or you send or you Slack or whatever your channel might be? I think that those are all really important. And I've had several really smart CEOs say to me, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And if you're not driving that culture, it's not going to happen. So
I love that framing, Keyana, that how our world is a blur. Even at Prezent, we say work-life harmony. You don't know where work starts.
There's no balance anymore. We're just trying to make it work.
We're just trying to make it work. Yes. So let me ask you this, right? So given all the different experiences you've had, maybe you can share some examples of how can the internal communication and the external communication get in misalignment? Maybe an example, and what are the risks to large companies because of that?
Yeah, I'll give you the example that sort of taught me, it sort of taught me this framework or this way of thinking. In 2016, I was working for Tableau. We were a public company. We were seemingly on top of the world. We had got a great IPO in 2013. Our customers loved us. We had this incredible community. We had an incredible product. Like, life was good. We had an earnings call in February of 2016. And, we look at tech companies. I've always said this, being public as a tech company is extremely difficult. Reason being, you don't actually build for 3 months at a time. You build for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years at a time. So to have to present your results every 3 months and they have to be different than what happened 3 months ago is if you've worked in tech, this is kind of a mind-blowing concept, which is why you see a lot of tech companies not rushing to go public, but that's another podcast. Anyway, we knew that, it's kind of, we weren't, maybe the numbers weren't where we wanted them to be, but, and there would be a little dip, but we weren't, overly concerned. And, what we didn't anticipate, I didn't anticipate, maybe people anticipated, was that there was, some industry trends where other tech companies who were also doing earnings that day had similar results. And to make a long story short, I will say our stock price dropped in half. And for those of you who aren't in tech, tech workers are, most of their compensation comes from equity. And so when the stock price cuts in half, that's basically everyone's, salary just got cut in half. And so if you think about, like, if you had just cut everyone's salary in half, like, there would be outrage, right? And so where I'm going with this is, all of a sudden the news is just like Tableau's going under, the world is ending, this, that, and the other. And of course, I know that we're not going under. I know that we're, this is just has to do with some industry dynamics. I know that, like, we're going to be just fine in 3 months. And this is where I realized the importance of internal comms is, I realized that the person who is not privy to the investor scripts and is not in the room with CFO and the CEO and they're all talking about it, all they're doing is reading the news. And so all they're doing is understanding or getting their information from what the news is reporting. And that's a problem. When you've got 3,000 people in your company who all think you're about to go under, that's not a good thing for culture, for morale, for productivity, for a million reasons. And I remember we were originally hesitant to put anything out in writing. We didn't want it to get out because, everything you write is you have to write it as if it's going to be leaked. We didn't want to, make a big fuss about it. We wanted everyone to just be like, no, don't worry. And I remember walking to the room and saying, guys, everyone in this room knows we're fine, but no one else does. And so we have to say something. And I wasn't the only one. There were, a few of us that sort of had this mantra. And that it was a really big deal. We had an awesome CEO at the time, Christian Chabot, who was the founder, and that man had the ability to sell sand at the beach. I mean, he had such a vision and a way to just kind of draw you in and make you believe that everything was going to be okay. And he did. And we really worked on his messaging, his narrative. We knew that it could have gotten out. We did have him go on the news, which typically, a lot of companies won't do when something like that happens, but we felt it was important for our employees to see him out there. And I think that was when I really realized, okay, you might, as a business leader, you might know what's going on and you might feel like everything's okay. And this is just like the news doesn't understand, or the people, these guys they're like, full of it. They don't get our business. They don't get, but your employees, like, that's what they're reading. And so if you're not transparent and honest and like upfront with them, that's where they're going to get their news. Right. And so that was a really, really big shift in how I approached PR. I really did believe before that, like, all press is good press and, all that. And I don't even think all good press is good press, because sometimes, you get good press, but it like doesn't align with what's going on internally. And that's a problem.
That's an incredible story, Keyana. Very, very vivid. Thank you for sharing that. So we have many business leaders who are listening in, and you reference some of the incredible CEOs and leaders you worked with. So based on your experience and from these internal CEOs, what tips or techniques you would have for business leaders to communicate well, both internally and also externally when they go and talk to media partners, customers, etc.?
Yeah, I have one rule that might seem obvious, but you'll be surprised at how often it is broken. And it's around authenticity. And, a lot of times I'll have CEOs who are like, well, what should I be doing on social? Should I be posting every day to LinkedIn? I go, well, is it like you to post every day on LinkedIn? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I go, well, okay, let's talk about it. Because if you all of a sudden start having someone post for you every day on LinkedIn and it's a bunch of scripted, content, no one's going to believe you. It's just going to look like you hired a social media person, and now they're just, and so, I mean, if you look at someone like Ali at Databricks, I mean, you can tell, I don't care if you're in comms or not, you can tell that he writes his own LinkedIn content. I mean, it literally sounds like he talks because it's genuine to him, and it's things he wants to share, and it's things and it's something that he does for himself, and he wants to do that. Not everyone is like that. Not everyone wants to be out there, which is totally fine. I think that the authenticity part comes out in the external part when you can tell when someone is very scripted. They stick to a very narrow, talk track, and that's not always a bad thing. Don't get me wrong, but it is an authenticity. People know when you're being authentic and when you're not, and it often hurts you more to say something that, even if it's the best thing you could have possibly said, if it's not authentic, it backfires. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I think the same goes with internal communications. If you are not someone who's on Slack all the time, then don't put your most important updates on Slack. If you are not someone who likes to blast the company with emails and you are more of a Slack person, put your most important updates on Slack. Frankly, you should probably put them on both, but there are ways to, if you're not a Slack person, you're an email person, I can put it on Slack. Like, hey, if you saw, so-and-so's email, there are ways to sort of build that authenticity, but I would say don't go to your comms person and say, what are all the things I need to do to be cool? Like, go in there and say, here are all the things that I would like to do, that I would like to do better, that I would like to do more of. Like, these are authentic to me. These are the things that I don't really care about, but if you tell me I'm supposed to do them, I'll do them. Those things, don't touch them. Do the things that are authentic to you, that make you, feel like you are someone who is being truthful and being your own person out there. I think one of the things that people always ask me is like, why is this job so hard sometimes? And I said, because it's deeply personal. It's a very personal job. If I'll say, if someone said to you, if I said to you, what people think of you, whether they think you're smart, whether they think you're a jerk, whether they think you're a genius, whether, whatever. And it's not just your prospects or your customers or your employees. It's like your neighbors, your college friends, your family. If what they think of you depends on how well I do my job, wouldn't you be on my case all day, every day? And that's what it is. It's very personal. And so when you take a very personal thing, your brand, and you muddy that with, inauthentic behavior or discussion, people see right through that. And that I've never seen that go well for anybody, truthfully.
Yeah. That's a great synthesis into that one thing if you can do well. And I can totally relate to it. And you also said, Keyana, like our personal and professional lives are so intertwined now. You have to be the same person, who you are across both. There's one part of your career I just want to pull out for a little bit of a discussion. Tableau's acquisition by Salesforce. So that must have been a tumultuous time, an exciting time. So any lessons we can learn from that part, how both when it comes to internal and external communication?
Yes. So I have to think about what I'm allowed to say based on my NDA. But, I think that was a wild adventure, because you have to realize when these acquisitions happen, especially at public companies, they're market moving acquisitions. So there's like 30 people in the company that know about it. I remember I used to have to ask my team who didn't know how to do very simple things. Like, I didn't know how to upload a press release to our website, because someone on my team always did it for me. And I had to go to him one day and I was like, hey, how do you upload a press release to our website? And he's like, I'll just do it. What do you need? And I go, no, I need to know how to do it. And he's like, why? And I'm like, you're not getting fired. Like, we're not replacing you. And I would tell these really stupid lies. Like, I would say, it's a new SEC requirement that the head of comms needs to know how to do that. And he's like, what are you talking about? And anyway, where I'm going with this is you're working in secret for a long, extended period of time. And you're about to shake up everybody's world, and you have the time to sort of process it. Like, I remember what I felt like when I first heard it, and I had a million questions, but then I had all this time to process it, and I knew what my questions were. So those were the first ones I put in the employee FAQ, like, when do I get paid? And I think that's something that is really important is, sometimes people will say, oh, well, our employees shouldn't worry about when their, stock is going to, get back to being liquid or whatever. And I'm like, and that's not what Tableau did. I'm just giving an example. Or, you'll hear people say things like, oh, well, the employees shouldn't be worried about that. They should be worried on, focusing on, their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And it's just a very tone deaf way to like run the world. Of course they're worried about this. Like, nobody's volunteering here. I promise you, if we didn't get paid, we wouldn't be here. We'd be doing something else, like everybody else. Maybe not you, because it's your company and it's your passion. But the rest of us, we're not volunteering. At the end of the day, we're doing this for income, and it's for our careers, to support our families. And so to sort of discredit FAQs or to not put in internal comms things that are genuinely going to matter and affect people's lives because you just don't want to answer it and don't want to deal with it, or you don't feel like you have a good answer right now, is not only tone deaf, but it's unfair. And, there were a few questions along the way that I felt like we really needed to answer. And, I had a couple of people say like, well, we don't really have a good answer for that right now, so let's just not put it in there. And I said, then we need to tell them we don't have a good answer for that right now. And we need to tell them when we're going to try to have a good answer for that right now, because it's not fair to, make people guess on their well-being and how they're going to support their family. And, I know when I would come home and my husband's like, when do you think we're going to be able to sell your stock? And I'd just be like, I don't know, like when this thing closes, well, when's that going to be? I don't know. And that's stressful, right? Like it's a stressful thing. And I think that it would behoove business leaders to have a little bit of empathy, like think of yourself in your 20s and your 30s and think about like, it's not enough just to care about your job and what you do for a living. It does matter, how you're being compensated and how you're being taken care of and your ability to take care of yourself or your family or whoever you're caregiving for. So I think that was a really interesting experience in just like watching in a fishbowl, like just, uprooting a whole bunch of people's lives and, and having to communicate that to them. It's interesting.
Your human kind of first, you started the podcast talking about how you took a very human approach to comms when you first started. It's so clear in that answer that, hey, people have real issues, questions. Not everyone's thinking about, the vision of the company. There are brass tacks people have to deal with. So, thank you so much. I'm sure many employees would have been extremely grateful for you being in that seat and putting the FAQs out, right? So it's the time now, Keyana, to switch to the quick fire.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you haven't heard these before. First phrase or words that come to your mind, just shout it out. Okay. Here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's one word you would use to describe the art of communication?
Complex.
Okay.
It's very complex.
Okay. How is AI changing the way we communicate?
I think it's augmenting in some sense. I think it's making it worse in other ways. I think it's augmenting good or bad, depending on how you use it. Yes, augmenting, and it could be used in a positive or negative way. Yeah. What is a common communication myth you wish people would unlearn? A common myth you wish people would unlearn? I think I talked about it a little bit before, but the all press is good press. It's not. No. Fair enough. And if there is one piece of advice, Keyana, you could give someone preparing for a big presentation in the enterprise, what would that be? I give this advice to everyone. And I think it goes back to the human element, and it's a little bit about the presentation, but it goes a little bit wider. If it doesn't matter in 5 years, it doesn't matter now. And I think I always say this because it's a perspective thing. Yeah. I always say I tell my team all the time, it's PR, not ER. Like, you're not a surgeon. No one's going to die on the table. If you get it wrong, it's okay. If it's not perfect, it's okay. If you make a mistake, it's okay. There are some things that will last, like, when you're announcing a $15 billion acquisition, you better get that right, because it will matter in 5 years. Or things like that. Yeah, you got to get those right. But I think, on the day-to-day, we get so bogged down with things that are just, they don't matter. And not that they don't matter, that you should take your things seriously and you should put pride behind your work. But I think we let things that don't need to get to us. Yeah. And so, I always tell my team, and people ask me this question honestly all the time. And I always say, if it doesn't matter in 5 years, it doesn't matter now. Like I have kids, their stuff is going to matter in 5 years.
Well said. Well said. Finally, what's something you wish you knew about business communication, Keyana, when you started your career? Something you know now, you wish you knew when you started your career?
CEOs are interesting people.
Say more. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. People always hear this, and I think they know this, but when you have to deal with it every day, it's a whole different ballgame. But look, you have to be a little crazy to start a company. I mean, you know this. You have to be a little crazy to start a company. You have to be even crazier to grow it. You have to be freaking nuts to not sell it and to keep growing it, and all the things that a lot of some of the most well-respected founders and CEOs in the world have done. And I think that the point I made earlier about it's deeply personal, I think early on, I didn't really understand just how personal it was. To me, this was just work. And over time, I realized it's not just work. Like their neighbors see this, their kids see this, their kids' friends see this, their college buddies see this, like people they respect see these things. And their brand matters to them, and it matters to them in a different way than, how much pipeline is being generated or, like those things absolutely matter. Don't get me wrong, but they matter in a completely different way. And they tap into a completely different set of emotions, because now we're talking about like people's personal insecurities, fears, judgments, things of that nature. And those are things that you often don't deal with in any other part of the business, but you do deal with it as a communications person. And that can take some thick skin sometimes. It can take some getting used to sometimes, but also I think you often, if you do it right, or if you really embrace it, you have a relationship with those people better than anyone can ever have. And, I've always told the CEOs I've worked with, like, I need to know everything. I'm like a parent. I can't help you if I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't tell me the truth, I can't help you. It's like what I tell my kids, but it's the same sort of mantra. And that was something that, I kind of wish I knew earlier. I would have saved myself some, sleepless nights and tears. And that's where if it doesn't matter in 5 years, it doesn't matter now.
I can really relate to that because, I left the role as a senior vice president at Cisco to start Prezent.
Yeah.
And people thought it was crazy, but you cannot sleep till you bring that idea to life. And so I can totally relate to, there's a fine line between being crazy and, building the next great thing. And of course, like you said, you're very vulnerable in the process of building because everything is in public now, right?
Yeah.
And your comms and your marketing team is really helping you bring that message out. So can 100% relate to what you're saying, Keyana. This was amazing. And so, Keyana, this concludes our discussion on the intersection of internal and external communications. We've explored importance of alignment, strategies for consistency, leadership's role in real-world applications, and how you can bring that very human-centric communication effort forward into the world. Keyana, thank you for sharing these amazing insights. I just love your perspective and the specific examples also you provided. So before we wrap up, our listeners, I'm sure they'd love to know where they can connect with you and learn more about you and your work.
Yeah, so there's a couple of places. One, of course, LinkedIn is, I think I gave up Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. But you can also catch myself and Becky Buckman of Battery Ventures. We did 3 seasons of our own podcast. It's called Just Checking In, and it has some of the most interesting, fascinating journalists, authors, communications professionals ever. Some of the folks that we got on there, I still don't know how we convince them to come on our podcast, but we did. So it's out there forever. So check it out. It's on Spotify and Apple Music podcasts.
Apple Podcast. Awesome. That's great. Thank you again, Keyana, for joining us. Next week, we'll continue exploring the art of communication and leadership with another incredible guest. To our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues. Until then, let's think deeply and speak simply. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Think Deeply, Speak Simply. This episode was brought to you by Prezent, your secret weapon for brilliant presentations. Visit present.ai to transform how you communicate. Until next time, keep thinking deeply and speaking simply.